Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Tuesday, May 19th, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Before we get to what's in store today, if you've never watched TechStrong TV before, it's about 2 to 3 hours, sometimes more, of just different interviews that we've done here on our TechStrong team. They feature interviews by myself, our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, and CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group, Mitchell Ashley. We also feature a reoccurring list of some of our friends. For instance, today's Tuesday, so it is John Willis Day, and John has a great interview today. We'll also feature Channel Roundup with Mike Vizard, Humans of DevOps with Jane Grohl of Devops Institute, usually once a week or so, and various other regularly scheduled kind of guest videos. We try to give you the news of what's going on in the technology space, specifically in cloud native, digital transformation, cloud transformation, DevOps, cybersecurity, DevSecOps. We are doing a large conference on these things called TechStrong Con. You can get more information on that at techstrongcon.com. Go check it out. We've got 30, maybe even 40 speakers now lined up. It's a 12-hour event starting at 10 GMT and running for 12 hours straight. It's good stuff there. So please check that out. If you have watched TechStrong TV in the past, thanks for joining us again. I hope you've been enjoying it. And just a reminder, you can watch this on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, our YouTube channel at Devops TV. You can watch this on TechStrong.tv or on digitalanarchist.com. You can also watch it on our mobile app, the Devops.com mobile app for Android or iPhone or iOS. And you can also watch it on TV using your Amazon Fire or your Roku or your Apple TV. Just download the Devops.com app and you can watch it there. We also feature our working from home video training with Jeremy Jones, which are workouts designed for you to do at home while many of us are still not able to get to a gym. And those are available standalone. Also, many of the interviews that we do here are available standalone as what we call our Digital Anarchist Spotlight series on digitalanarchist.com. So if you just want to rewatch or you missed a particular interview that you want to jump in on, you could go to digitalanarchist.com and check it out there. Big news today I also wanted to mention is that we put out our press release for the for the TechStrong Con conference on June 4th. It highlights some of the speakers and gives you a lot more information. And we will be really promoting this over the next 2-3 weeks. I'm really encouraging you. Go. It doesn't cost anything. Go register for our TechStrong Con conference. Check out who some of these speakers are. I think you'll really be amazed at the lineup we've put together. And we owe a lot of that, frankly, to John Willis. John ran the speakers committee. A lot of these people were handpicked and invited by him. And thanks to John. Go check it out. I think you're going to really like it. Let's talk a little bit about, though, what's on our show today. All right. So let's go over what we have in store for you today on Tuesday, May 19th. First of all, we're going to have Steve Kwan and Michael Watts from Trend Micro. Michael actually came to Trend, though, as a co-founder of the Cloud Conformity acquisition, which Trend acquired about 6 months ago. And really, Cloud Conformity is becoming a major part of Trend's cloud security offerings. So we're going to check in with Steve and Michael and see how that's going, and how Cloud Conformity is really helping Trend Micro with their cloud security. After that, we are going to go to a good friend of mine who I haven't had the pleasure of talking to in a while, and so it was really nice to catch up. It's Nigel Kirsten from Puppet. And for those of you who have been in the DevOps space for any length of time and have had the pleasure of meeting Nigel, there are very few nicer gentlemen you're going to get a chance to meet. Just all around guy, nice guy. And Nigel's been in Puppet now, I think, like 10 years. And over that course, he's held many different titles and handled many different responsibilities. Nigel is currently a field CTO for Puppet, which is actually a great position for him because he gets to talk to so many different organizations and really kind of can take in what all of these people are doing, saying, seeing, and synthesize that into making Puppet's offerings better, as well as telling them how Puppet can help them. Anyway, Nigel is based in London now, and so we caught up with him, and we'll get into his interview. Then from the something old, and again, if you're new to TechStrong TV, we try every day to pull one video from our archive of 2,000 plus videos or so and share it with you. So today's something old comes from the RSA DevSecOps event we did just this past end of February. And it features one of my favorite up-and-coming rock stars in DevOps and DevSecOps, and that's Jasmine James. Jasmine runs the DevOps Center of Excellence for Delta Airlines, and this is her presentation on what Delta was doing around DevOps as of the end of February. So we'll have Jasmine James from Delta's DCE on. Then I'll be on with the news. And then after that, we'll probably be around 90 minutes into our show. John is going to be, John Willis, it's Tuesday, so John's going to be on. And in today's episode, John interviews Paula Thrasher. Paula is someone I had the pleasure of meeting early on in my DevOps journey. Actually, probably through the Gene Kim DevOps Enterprise Summit. Paula has been a DevOps leader for some time. She's led numerous teams, primarily in the government contractor space, and really kind of pioneered and led the way in DevOps and government, and just a really bright lady. So John interviews Paula. I think you're going to like that one. Then we'll head things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has the CEO of DeverX, I believe, Mario Peshev, on today. And then after that, we are heading over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch Ashley. And Mitchell has some great insights lined up for today, as I think, as well as launching a new flashball. And then I'll be back for closing remarks. So it sounds like another great Tuesday here on TechStrong TV. We hope you'll stay with us. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now, and we'll be right back.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, Tech Strong. Featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kissler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Hey everyone, back here in the studio. Our first interview today, as I mentioned, features two Trend Micro executives. One is Steve Kwan, who's been with Trend Micro something like 20 years or so. Steve's a fixture there and runs a lot of their product lines. And joining Steve and I is Michael Watts. Michael is based in Australia. He was the CEO, one of the co-founders of Cloud Conformity, which Trend Micro bought about 6 months ago. Steve's going to give us some good insight into why and they bought Cloud Conformity. And then both gentlemen are going to tell us how Cloud Conformity has really become an integral piece of the Trend Micro cloud security mix. It's a good interview. I think you'll learn a lot there. And so let's go over to our interview now with Steve Kwan and Michael Watts of Trend Micro.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel here on TechStrong TV. We have our next segment up. I'm happy to be joined in this segment by Steve Kwan, EVP of Trend Micro, and Michael Watts, who was the founder, CEO of Cloud Conformity, and now, as part of Trend Micro as well. Michael, Steve, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. Happy to be here.
Thank you. My pleasure. And just so our audience knows, Michael was kind enough to join us from way down under in Australia. And it's kind of the middle of the night there for him, or later in the evening. And thanks for staying up and doing this with us, Michael. So, Steve, I thought we'd start with you. You're the EVP. You've been at Trend for about 20 years, you mentioned, right?
That's correct.
And that's remarkable in today's world, right, that someone would stay at a company that long. But,
quite unusual, yes.
Yes, it is. A lifer, as they used to say. But, Steve, I'd like you to set the table for us. Let's go back. It's 6 months post-acquisition of Cloud Conformity. But let's go back 9 months, 12 months, when you guys first, started maybe getting the idea of Cloud Conformity, as an acquisition target. What was driving that? What was the thought process? Give us a little background if you can.
Sure. It was really driven mostly by our customer feedback on their security posture. So Trend Micro's done a very strong job of securing servers and workloads in cloud platforms. But at some point, some of those attacks are based on other things other than just the server component. So customers would say to us, and they'd say, "Hey, you're protecting my servers, but this attack came in from this side. Is there any way you can give me a broader view of my entire cloud environment?" So we started working with Amazon and Azure and Google to say, "Hey, what do you recommend?" And they say, "Well, there's this industry called cloud posture where you can essentially just look at all your configurations and your entire cloud environment, look at the best practices. We recommend you look at some solution like that to enable and augment your server protection." And so we did a scour of the earth, and we actually had a strong recommendation from one of our cloud partners to go look at Cloud Conformity in Sydney. And we fell in love with what we saw. And it really does enable our customers to look into all of their cloud services, not just servers, but application load balancers, S3 buckets, Azure blobs. Are they configured correctly? Are they security risks prior to even deploying protection and managing the server infrastructure? So that was really what drove us, was customers saying, "I need a broader view of my security posture in the cloud versus just your focus on servers."
Excellent. And of course, so my background, I was the second acquisition in a roll-up once back in the .com days, 25 years ago. And then I helped that company do 30 acquisitions in 3 years. So I've done a few. We were doing like one a month. And one of the lessons I learned was you could have the perfect technology fit, but is there a cultural fit? Is there a talent fit? Is there it takes two to tango, as they say. And so, Michael, I'm going to ask you to chime in here. Sitting on the other side of the table at that point, what was the thought process of Cloud Conformity?
Well, this was actually something that we sat down as a collective group fairly early on. We were pretty lucky that we're in a market that was very active. It was growing rapidly, which meant there were a lot of opportunities to discuss partnerships, technology alliances, both strategic and I guess more informal. And as a leadership group, we made the decision early on that anybody that we partnered with, whether it was funding partners, technology alliances, or ultimately an acquisition, we would have to be culturally aligned. As you say, the technology fit can be there, but if you can't work with these people, if your fundamental sort of cultural philosophies aren't aligned, there's going to be challenges both for you as a team and for the customers. So that was the paramount, and I guess the catalyst for us to actually merge with Trend and go on this journey together.
Absolutely. So, we've got, as I said, it takes two to tango. You've got two parties here who say, yeah, no, this can be something. But, there's another saying when you're doing acquisitions, that is you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And generally, you don't see those kinds of issues arise until post-closing or right around the closing, right? Then things, all of a sudden, stuff's real now, right? And we've got to work together, and we've got to, and ultimately, you want to leverage an equation of 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5, right? You want to stronger. So let's now talk over the last 6 months. How has the relationship between the Cloud Conformity team and product, integrating into, one of the larger cyber companies in the world, in Trend, how has that kind of gelled? What have been the steps? What have been some milestones? Looking back on it, Steve and Michael, what do you point to as your success, or at least your road marks on the road to success?
I think, at least from my point of view, the biggest success we've had is been driven from, I guess, the transparency that we had through the diligence process. People ask me this question all the time, and how is it really going? There's no camera here, but expectation has really matched reality. Everything that Steve Kwan and the other executives that were involved throughout that acquisition process told us has come to fruition. Our roadmap has stayed the same. The entire team has remained in their existing roles. We're still fairly autonomous in terms of making the decision as to what we build and why, and largely that's driven from our customers. But I think that's been the foundations for the success. There's certainly challenges. I mean, Trend is a global company trying to navigate the different time zones, which we're already experiencing even with a 50 team in 4 different countries previously. But I think that is always the critical thing that I go back to, is setting the expectations on both sides clearly before we got into this position, and now it's just going on the journey together. I don't know if you agree, Q, but that's what I always think back to.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big surprises in my mind ended up being more positive than I expected. One thing that was really important to us was the Cloud Conformity acquisition is written completely in serverless architecture. And we didn't have any complete serverless architecture products, and we've learned a ton on how to do that, how to manage it, how to do ops. We're launching a couple of our own in addition to Cloud Conformity soon. And to specifically answer your question, Alan, we actually technically haven't integrated the products yet. We're kind of about maybe halfway through that. Hopefully we'll have kind of Cloud Conformity snap into one of our cloud platforms that we call Cloud One, hopefully around sometime in the summer. So technically we're still kind of working on the roadmap, but culturally I think we've done well. So one of our strategies is we don't acquire many companies, usually one a year versus one a month, like your life. We kind of let the company run. I mean, we assume that they built this company into a success, and we don't actually have a ton of value to add other than maybe some security intelligence. But from a product delivery, customer management perspective, we kind of let it run. So we've kind of funded the growth of Cloud Conformity post-acquisition, but hopefully haven't been too onerous or bureaucratic on top.
Super flexible and great executive support so far. So no complaints.
Yeah, no, it doesn't look like Michael's under duress, so I'm going to assume you haven't put too much on there. But just to be clear, that was just in a 3-year period. Then of course the .com bubble burst, and that was the end of those acquisitions, Steve. It was on to my next adventure. But anyway, so I guess I have to ask, because it's an elephant in the room. How has this whole COVID situation played out, on the backdrop of this evolving story between, Cloud Conformity integrating into Trend? How's it played out in terms of servicing customers? All of a sudden, everyone's working remote, more reliance on cloud. has this had any effect on things?
I mean, from my perspective, the team has adapted really well. We were pretty much set up to be able to work from home, and we don't have physical servers or anything in the office that we really need to be there apart from carrying our laptop home. So the team's been really resilient. We've managed to stay connected and still have that collaborative culture. We have obviously some customers that are more impacted than Trend Micro, and I think we're in a really lucky position. I think back, if we had have still been a fairly small independent tech company, we'd be in a much more challenging period as opposed to part of a strong cybersecurity giant like Trend Micro. So obviously challenging, but we're still pressing along.
Yeah, and on the Trend Micro side, we've been we're an incredibly globally distributed company and have been since our creation 30 years ago. And so for us, it hasn't really changed much. I think one of our challenges is hiring. You want to really be in a room with somebody to bring them into the company and decide they're the right person. It was interesting. We've closed all our offices for a while, and it was funny because normally when we do an acquisition, we bring in like this Delta Force IT team, right? So we come in and we upgrade servers and put in security. And so I had this right at the beginning of the acquisition. I had this team waiting. They were like circling in planes over Sydney, and I said, "Go, go, 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 go!" They dropped in. And they run into the office and they're like, "Where are all the servers? Where's the data center? Where's the cabling?" Right? Nothing. The whole thing was built in the cloud. The whole company works on PCs and laptops. So when COVID hit, they just moved from their hot desk to their home. And so from a interaction perspective, it all looks the same to us. So yeah, it's actually gone okay. Yeah.
It actually reminds me of a funny story. We'll go just after the acquisition, chatting to one of the Trend Micro IT team, and we're sort of looking at, how do you transition finance, HR, and IT? And we kept going back and forth for about 10 minutes around, well, who manages your IT? And I don't understand the question. There's 50 of us and we all do it, right? What IT? What are you talking about? And eventually I clicked that there's no servers and no patching. And
There's none of that. There's no closet. It's here in our office here at MediaOps.
yeah.
This office that we rented had a big old server closet, a really nice one with all the telecom, panels and everything. We use it to store the water bottles for the water cooler and toilet paper and paper towels when we have it, and that's our server closet. But Steve, I'm talking about when I did the acquisition, the company was Interliant. We were an early ASP, and I was part of the due diligence team, and they sent me out. We're buying web hosting companies back then. And they sent me out to do due diligence on a company in New Jersey who has their own data center as well. So part of it, I said, okay, let me see your data center. So they take me down the hall of their building to enter the data center. And they say, you got to take off your shoes. And I said, well, why do is it a religious thing? What am I taking off my shoes for? And they were like, well, no, it's static electricity. And they opened the door, and the data center the flooring is shag carpeting, right? Yeah. And I'm like, okay, we probably don't want to keep the servers in this data center. But anyway, yeah, you live and learn with those things. So guys, let's take a different view of the acquisition and what's gone on. What are you hearing from the Cloud Conformity existing customers, who were Cloud Conformity customers pre-Trend, and then from the Trend customers who now have this new product that they can, new solution that they can use as part of the, it may not be integrated, but it's still part of the Trend family. Michael, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so for our existing customers, we used to joke, we still have a strong relationship. We don't have thousands and thousands of customers, so we can still maintain those relationships for the most part. And they would joke on every call, have you been acquired yet? When's the news coming? This space was pretty hot in terms of acquisitions, but we were again pretty transparent going through that process to say, here's why we've decided to make this decision. Trend Micro believes in our vision. They believe in the roadmap. They understand and support our ICP. It's only going to allow us to actually deliver better product faster. So they've supported us with that process, and they're seeing that. They're seeing the doubling down in terms of the R&D team, the increased ability to deliver on our customer success program. So it's been positive for them. There was, we were acquired mid-October, and then you hit Christmas. So there was definitely the hiring really started this in 2020, but the investments just continue to grow and the product's evolving. And nobody in the R&D teams actually left. So turnover is always the biggest disruptor in terms of delivery. So we've been pretty lucky there as well.
Great. Steve, what about from your end of it?
Yeah, we've had some unique challenges, and maybe I'll just highlight them, particularly given the nature of kind of what you do and the work you do is, we normally as Trend Micro come in through our relationships with the security team. What we're finding is something like cloud conformity, cloud posture management is either a compliance team, which is an adjunct one, or what we're finding is cloud ops, DevOps, those people. And in all reality, even if our relationship is incredibly tight with the customer, we often don't know those people. And worse, our security customers at the customer don't know those people. So people say, hey, I love the visibility, but it's a maybe not a commonly known secret, but very few enterprises out there actually have a cloud security policy, right? So one, we sit down with our customers and say, well, let's create at least a cloud security policy. What are you looking for? And then at some point they go, well, I need to figure out where all the accounts are and get all the account information and bring them all in so this posture solution can look at all that. And so we're finding ourselves more helping our customers figure out who those account owners are, where those accounts are, and how to even get all that set up prior to actually using the tool. So it's been a little challenging. I think our customers are very happy because they want a better relationship with DevOps and don't always have a great introduction, partially because our customers struggle with a lot of manual processes, whereas DevOps is very automated, and even that is a different language for them, right?
Sure is. Yeah, we see this, and and this is that whole DevSecOps thing, right? And the good news is it's getting better. Those relationships are getting better, and so my background's in security for 20 years. After I left the acquisition, the roll-up, which was an ASP, I started Still Secure in 2001 and did security since then. But interesting, what we're seeing is the bridge from security to developers and DevOps is in making security tools that are understandable and relevant to developers, right? Developers typically are going to look at the typical Trend Micro security product and say, nah, now I understand why they always say no, and where they look at a cloud conformity product and say, I need this. This makes sense to me. It speaks to me. But interestingly, Steve, it's still the security budget and the security team that has to sign off on a cloud conformity or another kind of any DevSecOps. So, in this case, it's the product pulling the security, or the service pulling the security team, not necessarily kicking and screaming, mind you, but pulling these security teams closer to left into that DevOps and ops kind of world. And it's not a bad thing, in all honesty, right? I think we need to go there. And again, with this whole COVID thing, I think one of the repercussions will be that any company that hasn't already seriously started their digital cloud transformation, if this wasn't a swift kick in the pants to get them started, I don't know what else it'll take. So I think, we're really going to see an acceleration now towards these kinds of migration transformations. Cloud conformity is the kind of product that you need for that. We've got a few minutes left, actually not a lot, but one last question for you both, and that is topic more than question. So we're 6 months in, great. Let's, and it's so hard right now because of what's going on in the world, but where do you see this going, Steve? You mentioned Trend has a few more products around serverless and so forth coming out, right? And we're talking about an acceleration of a cloud transformation. How does this marriage acquisition get leverage down the road in helping us in the next phase, in the new normal, and what comes next?
Yeah, I think for us, from a security perspective, obviously that's the ilk we sit in. I think for us, adding a layer of security intelligence, security AI, machine learning on top of all the telemetry that's now getting generated in the cloud. So we have products that sit in containers. We have a serverless product. We're scanning S3 buckets and Azure blobs for anti-malware activity. We're doing network security in the cloud. All of that is generating events. It's right now, customers are sending it back into a SIM, back into a SOC, and there's no context. So we actually believe there's a layer of intelligence specific to the cloud where we can bring in all the telemetry of cloud conformity, these containers, that doesn't exist today. So now, today you would get, if you collected all that telemetry, which most customers don't, one, it's a big data problem, which we can solve for the customer. But two is there's millions of events going on, just like they used to do on-prem. And so the SOC is now sitting there going, well, you're not helping me by sending me a million events from the cloud on top of my million events from on-prem, right? So can you build that intelligence where you can take a million events down to 2 major detections I need to investigate this week or this month? And so to me, that's where this all wraps together. And that's why we love the breadth of something like cloud conformity, where they can see every service in the cloud and determine the configuration, the best practice. And then we can take our attack intelligence and say, oh, there's an attack on Redis. They're using misconfigured account management to get in. Then they do a lateral transfer over to some data infrastructure, and we can piece all that together and call that one attack instead of thousands of events or millions of events. So that's where we see it all headed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question.
I don't disagree. Yeah, no, it does. Michael, last words?
I would just reiterate that sentiment. I mean, for us, we've got this 50 feet view of the world from the infrastructure configuration perspective, but our customers were always asking, what's that next layer down? What's sitting on that virtual machine, or what's that security group being used for? So the opportunity for us to now collaborate with those other services that make up the overarching Cloud One platform and provide a more consolidated insight to the customer is what really gets me excited about really being here in 5 years time, 10 years time, and leading this new world, really.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we're way over time. I want to thank you both for joining us and sharing with us today. Continued success. Keep doing your jobs. Another fallout of everything that's going on in the world is we need more cyber than ever, unfortunately, because there's a lot of bad actors out there.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, Steve Kwan,
so
Michael
much,
Watts, Trend Micro, Cloud Conformity.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, back here in the studio. As I mentioned in my opening this morning, one of the things I really feel blessed about in being involved in the DevOps community was some of the great people I've had a chance to meet. And one of those people is our next guest, Nigel Kirsten. Nigel's been with Puppet for 10 years. He's held a bunch of different positions during those years. He was heavily involved in the State of DevOps survey for many years. He's been CIO. He I think in our interview he goes over some of his past positions with Puppet, but right now he's field CTO. He's moved back to London and he's based in London, and just having a seems like a great time doing this new role, which is kind of perfect for him. And Nigel is just, A, he's smart as heck, but B, just one of the nicest guys you're going to meet. So let's go now to our interview with Nigel Kirsten, Field CTO for Puppet.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV, Devops.com. We have a really special guest for our next segment here on TechStrong TV. This man doesn't need an introduction to those of us in the DevOps world. He's been a fixture in it for as long as I've been knowing about DevOps, and that's probably 7 or 8 years, but he's probably 10 plus years, but I'll let him tell you. It's my friend Nigel Kirsten with Puppet. Nigel, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to see you.
So not to embarrass you, but how long has it been with Puppet?
It's coming up to 10 years in November.
So I said about 10 years. Perfect. And of course, Nigel, if you're not moving forward, you're dying. And during these 10 years, Puppet has moved forward, as have you in your personal career. Give our audience, maybe people who aren't familiar, or maybe people who aren't familiar with your latest role, kind of what's been your personal evolution during these 10 years at Puppet? What, different roles?
It's crazy, isn't it? So I started off, I was an SRE at Google about 14 years ago, spent 4 years there running large-scale Mac Linux operations, spending some time in sort of production SRE, but also running a really large Puppet installation, which is how I met Luke and all of the original Puppet Labs folks. Joined Puppet originally, spent a few years running product, which was a little bit of a career change and learning curve for me. Went through a variety of product engineering leadership roles. I was CIO for a while we tried to centralize all of our infrastructure, and spent a while as VP of ecosystem engineering, bringing together community, our Puppet modules, the Forge, integrations, all of those things. Recently, I guess a year ago now, I moved to become field CTO. So I work in the customer success organization. So you can think of me very much as CTO of the customer champion. Out there in the field, I work with most of our largest, most complex and strategic accounts, lead our global solutions architects team. And it's just a really great job because I think it's really interesting moving from product engineering to the actual implementation side and really working closely with customers on this DevOps journey, digital transformation, whatever you call it. Everyone's trying to make their IT better.
Sure. I'm listening to your role. I'm reminded of my friend Sanjeev Sharma, who's now with Accelerated Strategies Group, an analyst firm we've spun up. Sanjeev was field CTO for DevOps for IBM for 3 or 4 years. And I will tell you, it sounds like a very similar role, actually. There are few catbird seats in the world that are better than your seat right now, Nigel, to really to have your finger on the pulse of what organizations are doing around DevOps, around whatever Puppet's doing with cloud native, whatever they're doing around technology. You're really in such a unique position where you're not talking to just 1 or 3 organizations. You literally have dozens of organizations, and so just as someone who seeks knowledge, like I know you are, we are, most of us are. What a great role to just understand what the market's up to and what organizations need and want. And then on the other hand, you're actually the nexus of taking in all of this market information, intelligence, 411, right? And then translating that back, not only to how can Puppet, or whatever organization you work for, how can Puppet help these people with these issues and challenges and initiatives, but reporting internally saying, hey, this is what we've got to do next. This is what these people really need. How do we make our services and products better to suit what their problems are right now? Right? And you take the COVID, everything's through the lens of COVID today. Again, you're in the catbird seat to say, hey, this is what I'm hearing right now from people with COVID. This is how we need to respond. This is what, we need to do. So Man, that's a great role. It's a great role for you too. I mean, because you're perfect for it.
No, I love
Very
it.
cool,
It's really
man.
great too. I think I often describe it as getting to peer behind the curtain of the conference talks. So
Yeah.
you're having those real conversations about the challenges they're having, because like it or not, everyone up on a conference stage is having
like
to tell a little
Facebook.
bit of a PR story.
Yeah, everyone's life is great. All is rocking and rolling. Let me tell you what we did. Yep, no doubt about it. I mean, it's a really a nexus point role and perfect for you. You know, we were talking off camera. We were lucky enough we snagged an interview with Abby Kearns about, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, when she was first announced as the new CTO over at Puppet. She gave us a little bit of insight into kind of where, you know, her agenda is and where she sees Puppet in market. She was, and prior to being CTO, she was on the advisory committee, so it's not like she was totally unknown into what Puppet's doing. But Nigel, who better than you to tell us what's happening with Puppet these days? Where are you guys, you know, seeing traction? What do you see the market? You know,
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I guess what I'd say is one of the things, and this is very much through the lens of the customers I'm working with, like those really big, strategic, complex accounts, we're seeing this shift from the idea of, I guess I'd say there was this DevOps myth that you picked small 2-pizza teams, let them have their own tools and just create lots of them and somehow magic would happen. And I think what we're seeing is that issues of governance, issues of compliance, audit, scale, all of those things start to become really real at that level. And you just can't really have that much chaos. What we're seeing though at the same time is they're just, for all the hype around Kubernetes, containers, all of those things, these are incredible technologies. And I don't want to sound like a naysayer at all, but for most companies, finding people with the skills and inclination to actually shift onto those platforms and re-architect applications, they're just too bottlenecked by it. When you add in a couple of other factors, like the fact that many big enterprises have been living under I call it the curse of project-based funding for a long time, where they have these huge legacy infrastructure that sometimes doesn't even have clear application owners. The idea that all of this was just going to pivot quickly to some container-based architecture is just not true. So we're seeing folks struggle with the skills required to modernize their infrastructure, and the fact that you just can't expect the 20,000 developers in a really big enterprise to go and learn a new tool, a new management system, all of these sorts of things. So the pivot we're seeing is that people are moving towards what we call platform teams or automation strike teams, where the IT teams manage to have an outsized impact by building self-service products for the rest of the business. So sort of going to where their users are and having much more of a product mindset. That's where we're seeing the real success happen.
Absolutely. You know, I'm reminded the first DockerCon I attended, and I'm trying to think if it was Austin or San Francisco, wherever it was. Kubernetes 1.0 wasn't out yet. I think 01. It was an early version. But I remember coming back and thinking to myself, you know, this container stuff, yeah, I get all the buzz about it and I could see how it's going to change the world. But it's hard. It's really hard. And unless they do something to make it much, much easier, I just don't see how people can, you know, just jump in that, switch streams, if you will. And now, of course, that's why I'm still working and not retired, because obviously a lot of people have made a lot of money on Kubernetes and containers and everything else. But it still remains hard, right? And no one stands up and says, hey, this is easy. And I think it's also why we see a whole, it's not even a cottage industry, it's a major industry of Kubernetes as a service, right? For people who just don't want to deal with that issue.
And I think one of the points I'd add there would be that, you know, people are getting huge value out of Kubernetes and containers, but they're not necessarily doing it by forcing everyone to interact with the platform and that tooling. They're doing it by taking the same approach I said, where they build self-service products. And that's sort of one of the reasons why, and we can chat about this in a bit, we've come out with Puppet Relay, which is an event-driven workflow system, because we really see that the new battleground in many ways, it's the workflow around all of these event-driven APIs that people are building out, you know, almost microservices for the business, self-service IT products that people have built. Yeah. And everyone's trying to tie these together in a CI/CD system. And it's really just using a hammer as a screwdriver, to sort of steal an analogy, and having a complex workflow that's really easy for people to treat in a composable, modular way. We see that as being a really huge sort of next area of development.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things we're seeing, because like you, my catbird seat is I get to talk to a lot of different vendors, a lot of different end users. One of the things we're seeing is this whole concept of Kubernetes API, right? You have your service mesh and all of that, but then you also have your Kubernetes APIs, and then you have securing these Kubernetes APIs, which is it's the new WAF almost, right? Because you're going to need that. There's no perimeter there, but you're going to need that at that API juncture. In terms of what's plugging in or what have you, there's got to be some security around it. So, but that being said, we're also there's this whole transition period stage that we're in, where you do have some people in various forms or in various stages of this evolution to this new stack, this new infrastructure. People with a foot in both streams. People who are saying we'll get to that. Like I said earlier, everything is through the COVID lens now. Everyone's excited about cloud native, but Nigel, what are you guys seeing? How is the instant, this whole situation the world finds itself in, how is that now, affecting this whole evolutionary thing we're going through?
I guess I'd say, one of my favorite quotes, William Gibson, the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed yet.
Yeah.
People are reacting in different ways.
Yeah.
Some folks are like, let's say, the big cloud migrations. Some companies have realized they haven't really hit over that curve to get the return on investment, so they're just putting it on hold. Others have managed to hit a tipping point and they're accelerating all of their work. So I think it's difficult to pick a, single sort of strategy that everyone's adopting. But I would say that the one thing that sort of cuts through all of that is that cloud native processes and principles have come to on-premise. Like, even if you haven't moved to a public cloud, even if you haven't got a truly elastic private cloud that's, consumption-based and all of those things we associate with cloud, we're seeing that the idea of self-service, that the person needing to do work can just hit a web page, hit an API, do the job when they need to do it. And the idea of programmable infrastructure, of treating everything as an API, even if you're not going to the cloud, there is immense pressure to do that internally in your on-premise infrastructure for your network gear, for your storage gear, for compute, for applications themselves, testing environments, all of these things. So I tend to think of this as very much, we've crossed the bridge to cloud native being accepted as the way to do things. It's just the degree to which you do that and where you actually choose to apply those principles.
Yeah. Plus, not having people in the data center because they can't go to the office or to the data center, I think is another reason why, whether it's a public cloud or, I always had trouble with the term private cloud, Nigel. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, okay, it's a private cloud. What does that really mean? In my own data center, I'm running something in a hypervisor, but it's not. The whole point of the public cloud was that elasticity, but whatever. That's a conversation for another day. But let's call it on-prem. I don't care whether it's private cloud or private non-cloud, right? It's on-prem, and the distinction between on-prem and off-prem, when there's no humans on-prem, kind of goes away, right?
To be remotely addressable.
Right, it's all remote anyway. So what difference, at some level, what difference does that make? And I think that might wind up being a huge lesson coming out of all of this is, call it private cloud if you want, but really, can your infrastructure be managed remotely? Or do you need someone here? So I come from the hosting industry, your old ASPs. We used to call it fingers, eyes, and not toes. Fingers, eyes, and something else, right? So we wouldn't manage your server, but we could do fingers and eyes and ears.
Check the blinking lights. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then they came out with those COBOL servers that had red blinking lights that were cool as crap. And I remember asking, it was Pat Conti, I think the EVP at Cobalt back then. I said, what's with the blinking lights? He said, they don't do anything, but they're cool as shit. And they were, you know. There was like the first one, I don't know if you remember, the first one-use servers, they were like cobalt blue, one-use servers. And yeah, it's a long story. I'll tell you over beers about that one day. But anyway, yeah, but that, you know, if there's no one there to do fingers, eyes, and ears, what difference does it make? And so organizations, I think, need to prepare for that. I think cloud native is the ticket, right?
Absolutely, and I think self-service has to be a really big part of that, because I think what we're seeing is, you know, no one's working from home right now. They're staying home trying to work, and I think there's a difference between the two. And it means, you know, all the people with kids, with life pressures, all of these different things mean our work days both expanded and become more flexible. And I think it's just meant that when you need to do work is when you sort of need it to happen. So if you're a developer needing to provision a test environment, you can't really afford to run through a ticket system and wait for manual approval, manual response, all of these things. Everyone's time zone shifted, dealing with different work pressures. You need to be able to get to the point where those teams can just get what they want when they need it. And that's a lot of the work we're getting done with Puppet Enterprise and big customers right now, is really being the action engine for those self-service products. And I think it's really exciting, because I think it's really, we've talked for a long time about DevOps being the path for IT to think about business value, you know, to get out of the IT basement and start being more strategic to the business. I actually think there's a really clear path to doing that if you're literally building products for the business to consume.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a nice thought to think that we're actually moving up the stack there, but and you know, not without. I mean, we should be. So it's not like someone's giving you something that you didn't deserve, right? It's in there. So I guess the question then, though, Nigel, is, you know, as you said, people are trying to work from home. Or you said it more eloquently than I did. When and if whatever the new normal is, and I don't even know when to guess anymore, but how much of this sticks, and how much of it do we say, let's go back to what we used to do?
Well, I'm hoping, you know, I'm eternally optimistic. I hope that we learn a few lessons here, that not all business travel is essential. You know, we don't all have to be, you know, polluting the environment, all of these things, that we can actually trust people at a distance without necessarily seeing their faces in front of us. I mean, I say all of this, but as I tweeted out the other day, you know, I genuinely miss working with people in person, my colleagues and customers, and I hope we don't lose that completely. I don't really want to be living in a VR headset for the rest of my life. But I really do hope that the idea of, you know, I think we're seeing an appetite for changing change management processes, for example, because a lot of those are heavily based around in-person meetings, reading documents synchronously, all of these really inefficient things that we've seen from our State of DevOps report research, that they're really a negative correlator to actual success. And the customers that we see that succeed really well are the ones who are going, hey, I've deployed automation, I've deployed all these automated testing, CI/CD for my infrastructure using PE and continuous delivery. Hey, change management team, what can we change about this process? Can we actually change those things in light of new capabilities existing inside the enterprise? And I think I'm seeing more and more of an appetite for getting rid of some of those long-standing bottlenecks in enterprise IT to innovation and agility.
I agree with you. And, you know, we're not a big organization here at MediaOps. We're 20 people. But, you know, we've got so many balls in the air right now. And it's not like we're an idle shop here in terms of our change management and all of that. But I am seeing it just, that the whole change management thing doesn't work for us the way it did when everyone was in the office and you could do that. But speaking now as a CEO, right, I'm torn between, I feel with everyone remote, we need that process more than ever because everyone is, right?
But I think you've got to adjust.
I also need to go faster.
Yep. Yeah. So what's that old joke about development managers? Like I want quality over quantity, but also quantity.
I want it all. Sounds like my wife.
I think this is where, if you actually work with those groups, because I think for too long inside enterprises, we've seen that change management's over here and the IT folks are over here. And they build automation, they build all these great things, and they're just not collaborating with the change management folks. I think just as we've seen with the whole rise of the DevSecOps movement, the idea of shifting left and not collaborating at the end of the process, but collaborating early, codifying all of that work in terms of code so that it's reliably pushed out. We see people doing the same thing with their change management teams, going, hey, look, instead of filling out this form each week for these particular changes, here is what we do with those changes. We automatically stand up a testing environment. We automatically have acceptance tests running through it. We have a rollback process. Well, we have a roll forward to the old state process defined there. All of those things are automated, and we can literally, when we hit commit, it runs through all those things within tens of minutes.
And it's documented.
It's all documented.
Right, but we don't have to have an election on it, right? And the pre-election debates and everything else that goes with that. And I think that's the part I want to cut out. So what you just described is what I'm looking for. Of course, it's easier said than done sometimes, I know. And we're not a large organization, right? In a larger enterprise, I could see where it would go there. Nigel, we're over our 20 minutes, but man, it was great catching up with you. We can't let it go this long. I know you're out in London now. I don't know when I'll be in London again, unfortunately. But next time I am, we'll definitely, unless you find who knows, maybe we'll be in conferences again, in person.
Maybe conferences will happen again. Otherwise, come over for an ale or a gin and tonic.
Yeah, we'll have to meet you for a quick drink there. Hey, man, I love this role for you. I think it's perfect. It suits you to a T. And let's come back soon and check in with us. Tell us what you're hearing, what you're seeing. Because it's great. Keep up the great work at Puppet. All right. Nigel Kirsten, Field CTO is that fair to call it that?
Yep.
Field CTO at Puppet, coming at us from London on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind Devops.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Back here in the studio now, it's time for our Something Old. Our Something Old today comes to us from our RSA DevOps Connect DevSecOps Days event. There was a lot of great speakers there this past year, but one of the best is this next lady, who I really think is an up-and-coming rock star in the DevOps and DevSecOps space. I've had the pleasure of watching her present and interviewing her now a few times. And that's Jasmine James. Jasmine is with Delta. And in this presentation, Jasmine talks about what Delta was doing through their DevOps Center of Excellence and some of their experiences. It's a really great presentation. Let's go now to Jasmine James at RSA Conference 2020.
Zero North delivers a platform that enables companies to orchestrate their vulnerability scanning tools across the software development lifecycle. We can help you identify where there may be vulnerabilities and risks and help you prioritize and remediate that. It is impossible for companies to understand where there's risk and vulnerability from application to infrastructure and to tie that all together. With Zero North, we make that impossible possible.
Our next speaker is Jasmine James from Delta Airlines. I've been working with Jasmine for a couple years now, a couple times already this year. She's got a phenomenal story. What we're talking about here is we're going to continue the conversation on what it takes to transform your organization, because I think most people, when they start DevSecOps and DevOps, they're thinking about tooling instead of what's going to happen with the transformation of the company itself in order to accept that whole change that's going to happen. So Jasmine, come on up.
Yeah.
Doing good?
Yeah.
And you got your slides up. And she's also an author of the Epic Failures in DevSecOps, which you can get a copy at lunch. Okay, please, Jasmine James.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so I've been told to project, so I might look like I'm screaming, but it's only because I want to make sure you all can hear me. So how's everybody doing this morning? All right, so I'm a high energy speaker. I'm going to be engaging with you as I share my story. So very excited to be here at my first ever DevSecOps Days. I've heard great things about this event, so thank you to Sonatype, Mark Miller, Derek Weeks, and Alan for having me here. Really, really great stuff. All right, so Delta Airlines DevOps transformation. So my name is Jasmine James, as Mark mentioned. I am the leader of the DevOps Center of Excellence at Delta, and we're responsible for really three aspects. The first one being our development tools. So everything a developer touches, my team owns. We're also responsible for developer practice, so how they're developing code within industry and Delta-specific standards. We're responsible for the cultural transformation. I'll talk a little bit about our dojo during the presentation. The last aspect that was just recently added to my plate is our application developer experience as it pertains to cloud. So I'll talk a little bit about all of that, but just wanted to share some context. So what you don't hear me say is security. So I am solely within the developer realm. There's actually another part of our organization that handles security and application security, and I'm working closely to try to invoke that into our DevOps pipeline now. So more to come on that. All right, so you probably heard of us. So a couple of things about Delta is that we serve over 200 million people every single year, and we have a network of over 300 destinations in 50 countries. I'm headquartered in Atlanta, which is also the busiest hub ever, with over 1,000 daily departures. 1,000 daily departures to over 225 destinations. And we have a lot of people that work for Delta, 90,000 as of last year. So all of that connectivity is enabled by great people. And we were also recognized in some great ways last year. We were 2019 Best Place to Work for Women and a top engineering company to work for as a software engineer. So the latter one was a bit of a surprise for most people, but we do have a great IT organization. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of pose to you was the fact that we're focusing on really adapting, right? So the travel industry has adjusted many different, keeps moving. The travel industry has adjusted in many different ways for the past 10 years, right? So how many of you flew into San Francisco to be here at RSA? Raise your hand. Okay. So keep your hand up if you flew on, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to ask who you flew. But I want you to think about how technology enabled your journey to get here, right? So whether it was from using a QR code to check in on your flight or even looking to see which gate you were at. It's safe to say that innovation has enabled your journey to be smoother and less stressful. And that's one of the things that we're focusing on at Delta, innovation. So one of the great things we were able to do a month and a half ago, we were the only airline to ever give a keynote at CES. So it was a really great presentation that our CEO, Ed Bastian, gave. And during that presentation, he talked a lot about some of the ways that we want to improve your journey, the experience of your journey. So I just wanted to highlight just a couple of things. So the first way that we're going to be doing that, starting this summer in the Detroit airport, is the ability for an individual to see personalized signage as they walk through the airport, utilizing their human naked eye. So we partnered with a company called Misapplied Sciences, and now in Detroit this summer, and if an individual walks to look at a screen to figure out where their flight is, they'll see information specific to them, which is really, really neat. So if you want to find out more information about that, you can definitely search the net for the presentation. But that's just one of the ways that we want to set our experience apart from others. So all of the innovation that I talked about has to be enabled and delivered reliably and with quality. So that leads me to our DevOps transformation, which I actually was a part of in its infancy, starting in 2017. So the next thing I want to do is kind of walk you through what that timeline looked like for us at Delta. So in 2016, we had a CIO join our company. His name is Rahul Samant. He's now an executive vice president at Delta. And he had a rough first couple of months. So in the first couple of months of him starting, we had a huge data center outage, which grounded all of our flights for about 2 days. So that is definitely a rough first couple of months. So naturally, we wanted to make sure that we were focused on reliability and making sure that our infrastructure was resilient enough to support our operations. And I'm not sure what phantom is moving my slides, but we'll keep going back. We focused on reliability on our infrastructure. Also in 2017, about the time I started, we wanted to start to set the stage for new developer tooling. I also own the legacy tooling, which includes ClearCase. Anybody still using ClearCase out there? No, I didn't think so. Thank goodness, because it's not fun. But my team is working on migrating all of our development community from it. But we wanted to make sure that we were setting the stage for not only modern tooling that could enable fast delivery of that value that we want to get into our customers' hands, but also being able to attract top talent. There's no way I can put out a job requisition today with ClearCase on it and I'm going to get any real bite. So we wanted to make sure that we are attracting top talent as well. So that was established. We decided to go with GitLab, Jenkins, Nexus, and some other tools in order to establish that main tool chain. In the latter part of 2017, we also focused on our agile transformation. So this was aligning our business and technology partners to make sure that we were delivering what we wanted to get to our customers in a very efficient manner. So all of that started initially. I'm not sure what's going on here. Keeps moving. Moving on to 2018. So a lot of work that was done in 2017, we worked on making sure we were disseminating that. And this is where our Devops Dojo comes into play. So in 2018, middle of 2018, we launched our first dojo. And this is an immersive experience, and you heard Ross kind of allude to it, in which we wanted to make sure that the teams that were utilizing all of the new tooling, new practice, new culture, were able to be immersed in that environment. Instead of just telling them to go do it, we taught them how to go about that. All right. In 2019, this was last year, I talked a little about our cloud journey. And one of the main things about our cloud journey that really kind of was enabled by our DevOps transformation is the ability for us to deploy microservice into the public and private cloud. So we set the stage by adopting a platform as a service, OpenShift. And with that, we were able to give our developers the ability and empower them to use infrastructure as code, leverage common methodologies such as Ansible, complex deployment methodologies like Canary and Blue Green, and they were able to deploy a lot faster. Heading into 2020, we're focused on AWS now in Azure and being able to flex into the public cloud via a hybrid model. So that's our DevOps journey in a gist. I want to now move on to some of the challenges that we faced while we were on that journey. So the first thing that we faced was tooling. I talked a lot about our legacy tooling. So the challenge that I have today as a leader is ensuring that not only our developers can be enabled with this tooling, but how do I give them like for like? You would think that GitLab and Nexus and Jenkins are, so much better than the legacy tools, but really when you have a large IT organization with developers that have been there for 15, 20, 25 years, it's more difficult to kind of sell it and get that buy-in. So one of the challenges that we faced is through a migration. So we've kind of gotten to the point where, those that wanted the new tools are using the new tools, but we've gotten to the position where we want to make sure that those people that are kind of like, I don't really want to switch right now. How do we sell the tools to them and get their buy-in so that they understand that this is meaningful and it improves their work-life balance? The next challenge that we've had is the adoption of new process with more guardrails. So of course, as you deliver more tooling, more capabilities that are even offered by some of our great vendor partners back there, you have the ability to have more guardrails. And of course, my leadership wanted to ensure that, hey, we're using this new stuff. How do we make sure that individuals are using it in the right way? If you take away the ability for someone to, go and make a change on a production VM, right, and you take away the ability for them to do that, it's kind of like, okay, I don't have any power anymore. So we had to teach developers that this is the right way to go about managing your infrastructure as code and making changes in production. So that's another challenge that we faced. Our last challenge, and probably the most difficult, if you've gone through transformation, and Ross even mentioned it, is the cultural change. So making sure that individuals understood the new responsibilities. When you're talking about DevOps, it's no longer delivering code and forgetting about it. You're essentially responsible for that code, for the life of the code, which is definitely a new mindset that you have to create. So all of those challenges, right, that we had to think of a creative way to address those. And how do you do that? With the dojo. So we kicked off our dojo in 2018, as I mentioned, and one of the greatest things that started this was through partnership. So there's been a lot of talk this morning about community, and one of the great things about the DevOps community is that we love to share. So we actually worked with Target, Ford, Home Depot to learn how they were going through their transformations. And we took some of the aspects of each and formed it into a Delta dojo. We actually call it our Speed to Market dojo. And we've been going for about 2 years now. We've had about 50 teams come through. And we've evolved our program in many ways, but 4 things remain the same that we focus on. The first one is co-location and collaboration. And of all the challenges that I mentioned, we had to make sure that the entire team was there learning together and it was applicable to their day-to-day life. So that's one thing that we focused on. The next aspect of our dojo is a focused curriculum that targeted our Delta standards and industry standards. So it wasn't just what a team wanted to know. We wanted to make sure that there was a commonality across all the teams and there was a focused curriculum that they could use in their day-to-day. Next, we've also delivered on-demand coaching through subject matter experts. So not only were teams learning this base level curriculum, they got coaching as they were doing their day-to-day jobs. And lastly, we gave the teams the freedom to experiment. So since our transformation was pretty new from a DevOps perspective, we got the opportunity to really experiment with different sort of capabilities, different tooling, different automation processes. So these are all the things that we considered. So within the dojo, we've been able to see lots of growth with teams. So all of the challenges that I mentioned, tooling, practice, and cultural, we've been able to address through our dojo and been able to adapt quickly because teams are there in person and we're going with them on that journey, not just telling them how to do it. So over the years, our dojo program has evolved quite a bit. So in the past 2 years, we've been team focused, flexible duration, individual competency offerings, and enabling scaled teams. So talking about a full value stream. We bring the entire value stream instead of just individual teams. So the way we've kind of pivoted this year is through developer onboarding. So when you think about bringing a team into a dojo immersive experience, it's a great thing, right? But teams sometimes are not long-lived, right? You have teams that sometimes they'll say 6 months, a year, but usually some of those team members will go to other teams. So we've kind of pivoted and focused on developer onboarding. So as any new developer comes into Delta, they now experience what we called kind of like a birthday at Delta, where they get all of the basic tooling, all of the basic cultural learnings to understand how we work here at Delta. So that's one of the ways that we're kind of pivoting in 2020. We've also included AppSec education and practice. So in the past couple of years, application security has not been a focus, but we finally have the representation from the security side that will allow us to inject that into our curriculum offerings and make sure that it's at the forefront of developer experience. Lastly, security and pipelines. So we've been able to establish a common pipeline across Delta. It's not as widely as adopted as I would like, but we're getting there. And now we're even sprinkling in security within there. So when you talk about OWASP dependency scanning and making sure that teams understand what's in their software as they deliver it, that's what we're focused on now. So with those additions, you could say that we are making the shift from DevOps all the way to DevSecOps. So the next part of my presentation will focus on how we're going to do that and what our plan is to continue to drive that maturation of the teams and make sure that security is at the forefront. So I love this saying, what would security do? So our security organization was really ramped up about 2 years ago with the joining of our CISO, Debbie Willer, in 2017. And she's been able to establish world-class security from an infrastructure standpoint and through education of the 90,000 employees at Delta. So now we're focused on application security. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through collaborating with her team. So this is a before picture that I have up here. And all of these individuals in the room represent our QA organization, our Agile organization, DevOps. But if you look, there's an empty chair. And that is where security usually is pictured. They're not in the room usually. So one of the ways that we're doing or including security is making sure that it's at the forefront of the conversation. So in our architecture review board meetings, I'm not sure how many of your companies do that, but security is now one of the first things that we talk about when you're thinking about developing a new technology and a new capability. How will this impact our security and make sure that we can protect our brand image at Delta? The next thing that we are doing from an AppSec perspective is establishing foundational security knowledge across the organization. So through the dojo and through other organizational learning capabilities, we've been able to establish a formal education plan to make sure that at least everybody understands the basics of security from an application perspective. So those are a couple of ways that we're doing that. There are still a couple of challenges that we have. So as I said, I'm also in charge of our application developer experience as it pertains to cloud. And cloud security is one of the things that we're challenged with right now in understanding how the cloud impacts our application security. So if you're in that space, please find me after. I would love to talk about ways that you're solving for that. And another thing that we're challenged with is creating a culture of security. So we've already made the first step towards creating a DevOps culture, but how do you take that one step further and add security on top of it? So just a couple of challenges that I'm throwing out there. All right, and this is just the call out to one of the fun ways that we're injecting security. So if you're thinking about making the step towards DevSecOps, this is one of the really successful things that we were able to do. We actually had our first hackathon late last year, and during that event, we were able to, in a fun way, include security so that individuals got pretty much a positive experience, right, with security the first time. If I had $1 for every time someone said, security, they said this or said that, and it's kind of in a negative connotation. We wanted to expose our security offerings and our security posture in a fun way. So a hackathon was a great way to do that. All right, so what's next for us from a DevSecOps perspective? So we talked about education, but next for us is open source governance. So one thing that we're looking to do in the next 6 months is establish some sort of governance model that allows our developers to not think about what they're utilizing within their software. We want to make it automated, we want to make it easy to adopt, and that's one thing that we're focused on with the security organization right now. Next, we're focusing on benchmarking our greenfield applications. So understanding all of our applications that are being newly developed, making sure that they are at a base level from a security standpoint from Delta's side. So if we have a new application that's being developed, making sure that at the most basic level that it's good to go from a security standpoint. Next, curriculum, alignment, and maturation. So making sure that we're going to the next level for application security, especially from a cloud perspective. So as we develop our LMS, our learning management system, and we continue to disseminate that information, how can we ensure that we're all continuously incorporating industry best practices into that curriculum? And lastly, which is in my team's purview specifically, is creating easy paths for pipeline adoption. So a lot of times when you introduce new things, it's sometimes difficult for everyone to utilize them. So by using Jenkins templating engine and other easy ways for teams to utilize it, we're creating easy paths for pipeline adoptions. So that way when a team is developing their application, they don't have to think about it. They put it in their pipeline and you're done, essentially. That is what's next. So that's really the gist of my presentation. I wanted to give a shout out to the sponsors. Thank you so much for creating the opportunity for us to share here at the DevSecOps community. And lastly, I would love to connect with you all to talk about some of those challenges, specifically in cloud, and also within the cultural, creating a culture of security is one of the real challenges that we have at Delta. So please add me on LinkedIn. I'm not on Twitter, but I can be reached on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you.
Mike, you got me? Good, thanks. We still have time for questions. If anybody heard something that they liked and want to ask a question, anybody going to run to the mic? Yes, I have somebody here.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about taking care of converting all the legacy applications into the new model.
Yep.
However, like from my experience, what I've seen is there are 1 or 2 applications which are highly customized in legacy, which are practically impossible to convert, right? Have you encountered any such? If so, like how do you deal with that process-wise? You leave it as is or like you build a bridge?
Right, so we've established an application modernization program that does just that. It takes a look at applications and it gets an understanding of, is it worth investing the time to re-architect it into microservices and put it into the cloud, or do we just lift and shift it? So there's definitely opportunities for both. I think from a breakdown perspective, only about 7% of our applications are just pretty much as is, right? And we're going to work on rewriting them into microservices. So that's what we're doing. So they kind of get lifted and shifted to new infrastructure, but with the intent of rewriting it into a microservice and breaking it up. Yeah.
Good. Did you get something for your notes? I hope you were taking notes. Got something? Good.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, as always. Thank you.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hi, everyone. All right. It's that time of the show now where we're going to do our news. Our news headlines for the day. As usual, it's just a few headlines from a couple of the articles on Security Boulevard, Devops.com, Container Journal. There's a lot more up there, and I encourage you to go check out some of the other great articles on all 3 sites. But let me tell you what we've got for today. On Security Boulevard, we have how has COVID-19 had an impacting cybersecurity teams? Well, it's made more work for us, certainly. Doing it from home, or the obvious ones, but take a look at the article. I think you'll find out more. Second article I want to highlight on Security Boulevard is, I think, an area that is getting lost in the sauce with all this COVID-19 stuff, and that's IoT. Internet of Things is in prime time now with billions of devices, and we have so many different vendors both selling IoT devices and claiming to secure IoT devices, and in some cases both. And they really can be a security problem. So IoT and vendors, how to stay safe, check it out. Then up on Container Journal, we have The Case for Kubernetes, Why Enterprises Should Embrace It with Open Arms. Open Arms. I thought they were embracing it with open arms, but I guess it depends on who you talk to. But have a look at the article. I think you'll enjoy it. And then also up on Container Journals, from some news from our friends at Rancher Labs. Rancher is launching a free training program. And of course, they have a Kubernetes distribution with Rancher OS, which is very, very popular. I'm sure their training program will be spectacular. Check out the article for details. Over on Devops.com, we have 5 reasons your legacy IT management tools are holding you back. And there's probably more than 5 reasons, but have a look at the article, especially if you're looking, with everything going on with the work from home and remote. Changing your IT management tools is probably in the cards for you right now. And here are some gotchas maybe you can avoid next time. Next, we have our good friends at SUSE. SUSE partners with Microsoft on Azure. So, Linux has been available on the Azure platform for some time. SUSE partnering with Microsoft. I would on a SUSE distribution on Azure. And then we have from our friends at GitLab, they have a new research out on advances in DevSecOps. And I think that's going to be a trend that we'll see over and over again, right? This whole DevSecOps area, we're continuing to see more adoption, more stuff going on with it. That's it on news, right? Rather, for Tuesday, 3 articles on each site. But as I always say, this is not meant to be inclusive. You really need to go to Security Boulevard if you want to stay up on cyber. Go to DevOps and Container Journal for cloud native Kubernetes DevOps news. There's so many more than the couple articles that I cite here. So go check those out. I think you'll find them interesting and great resources. But that's it for our news today. Now, it is Tuesday. And so that means it's John Willis Day. So now we are going to cut over to our friend John Willis, who has a great guest lined up for today. Another friend of mine, Paula Thrasher, who really is just really bright woman and one of the pioneers in the DevOps government contractor space, large organizations. Paula always has some great stuff to say. So here's John Willis interviewing Paula Thrasher.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, this is John Willis. This is another video podcast series. I've got a great guest this morning. Paula, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Paula Thrasher. I am executive for large organizations in the aerospace and defense industry, and I've led a lot of large DevOps transformations. And John and I first met, well over 5-6 years ago now, and so excited to kind of chat DevOps.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay. Hey, John, that was another great interview, man. And love listening to Paula. So I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Up next, we're going to go over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has Mario Peshev, CEO of DevRex, and they're going to talk about strategies to run an effective tech or software team remotely or distributed, on low code, and more. So here now is Charlene.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Mario Peshev, who is CEO of a company called Devrix. Is that correct? Devrix?
Absolutely.
All right,
You
perfect.
just nailed it. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me today. Really appreciate your time. Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, tell me about your company. Don't really know anything about it.
So we've started back in 2010 as a WordPress development agency specializing in the enterprise. Initially, we launched as a traditional software development company, but we focused on WordPress because of the lack of traditional best practices in software engineering in the WordPress industry, which is why we had the opportunity to work with banks and telecoms and automotive companies, and additionally large publishers serving over 500 million page views per month. So as we started 10 years ago, we were fully distributed. And over the past 3 to 4 years, we started to hire more people in-house to our headquarters. And now, thanks to COVID-19, we had to get back to our roots and, test if our best practices that we initially launched with a decade ago were still valid and whether we could still handle it during the time of the lockdown.
Sounds like that was a real learning experience for you then. So, what have you learned in that time since from your humble beginnings to having to pull back to be a fully remote workforce again?
Well, there were quite a lot of valuable lessons that we learned over the past, I would say, decade. Now, I started to preach remote back in 2012, working with hundreds of small and mid-sized businesses, teaching them how to adapt remote in their environments. That was back before we had Zoom, back in the old days, so to speak, and also helping out other agencies to transition to a partial or a fully remote model. And at some point, when you go past the scale of 10 or 15 or 20 people, even if you had a successful business model as a distributed company, there's a specific distinctive shift that kicks in when it comes to certain roles that no longer operate the same way they used when you were a really tiny team. And this is an ever-going change when you switch to 30 people, 50 people, 80 people, 120, 150, roughly speaking, at every 30 or 40 people, by shaping and forming different departments, different divisions, when you discover different roles that may or may not necessarily be practical and effective when working remotely. And this was kind of the biggest breakthrough that we had back then, because back when we started, it was pretty trivial in the sense of everyone was fully committed. Everyone had to deal with lots of different things. It was very transparent when someone does something that's not supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. And at some point at a larger scale, it was something that's really hard to track down. And this is kind of the primarily problem that we see with most companies which are testing remote working one way or another, by telecommuting 1 or 2 days a week or some other hybrid model. There's, of course, the common problem with micromanagement. And employees often say, well, my boss is asking me to set up this screencasting software, which is taking a screenshot every 5 to 10 minutes, or they're tracking down every move of mine, or they ask me to use something like Upwork to track my activity and my keystrokes. And of course, this is very invasive. This is extremely intrusive. But again, we also need to be realistic in the sense of we can't just let everyone leave the office, switch fully remotely, and stick to the very same processes. Especially if we transition from on-site to a fully remote model, we have to recognize that most employees are probably not aware of the best practices of working remotely. They don't have the necessary responsibility, so to speak, and most likely, and especially now in times of COVID, they most likely struggle with different types of problems or different types of circumstances that impact their productivity, be it kids at home or just other family members or crowded space at home or construction work at their neighbors, anything like that. So all things considered, what managers and what bosses need to recognize is that the current state of remote working is far from what actual remote working looks like. And most likely the vast majority of their teammates are not used to sticking to communication guidelines and best practices and everything else which is required to build a fully productive remote team. The one thing that I definitely like to stress on is communication and KPIs, or some form of results to focus on. Crisp communication, frequent check-ins, everything like that on one end, and just setting KPIs and expected results and the expected outcome from each and every team member instead of tracking time and availability.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually that you mentioned communication because, you know, as a full-time remote worker myself, even before all this happened, I even saw that communication sometimes can be an issue with everybody else is in the office or most other people are in the office and you're kind of out there in the outback, if you will. But you know, it can be extremely difficult when your entire workforce is remote. So how can organizations kind of keep that in mind, and what are some of the things that they can do to really foster communication among their, not just the management and the employees, but the employees themselves?
That's a great point. So back to communication with semi-distributed teams. Different studies I've looked into state that the average person speaks about 120 to 150 words per minute. And when typing, most people tend to type at around, say, 35 to 45 words per minute. I'm not talking about a competition, I'm talking about the regular way the mind flows when people are trying to consider what exactly they need to type in and so on. So given that, we need to recognize the fact that written communication, by definition, happens 3 to 5 times more slowly as compared to just speaking at the office. And this impacts communication in a couple of different ways. First off, we don't have to enforce frequent video calls and phone calls and so forth, and try to build a more asynchronous process which doesn't depend on that frequent communication. On the other end, of course, we don't have to fully neglect the benefits of having video conversations, of having audio calls, simply because of the fact that some people are emotional and text communication works differently than, you know, it misses body language and voice tone and everything else that defines the full paradigm of having an effective communication. So finding the best mix between these two things is important to actually impact communication in a positive way. The second thing in terms of refining communication properly is trying to streamline a process and trying to build a process that works effectively. The kind of the best practice we found to make that happen, and that's especially with new people and with juniors and everyone else who isn't really well adjusted to remote working and isn't really familiar with our company, kind of our best practices again are asking them to touch base every hour or two with a report, how they feel, any blockers, anything else that prevents them from working. What we found is that people are often afraid from reaching out, especially to managers or team leaders, because they know that their superiors are busy, they're dealing with something that's far more important, and this is why they're trying to spend far too long on solving simple problems. But once again, this is adding up, and this is creating a pretty complex problem at the end of the day, instead of just having a quick 5-minute conversation, syncing the workload so far and making everything work smoothly. So what I'm usually telling my staff when they switch to fully remote or when they have any problems or so forth is try to over communicate as much as possible. If needed, every 30 minutes, if needed, a review of every single message, whatever it is. If I tell you 3 times in a row over the course of a week or two that you're over communicating, then you've probably had enough, but not too much. So just trying to build this paradigm around over communication aims to achieve one specific thing. Make sure we're on the same page, make sure that we are looking in the same direction, and make sure that people can be independent by receiving affirmations and confirmations until they're comfortable enough working by themselves. So again, it's not about micromanagement, it's not about causing over communication, it's more about, I want to figure out how you think, what sort of blockers you're facing, try to unblock you as best as possible. And once I see the pattern of you being self-driven and self-managed and performing as best as possible, we are simply going to reduce all those boundaries and let you work as standalone as possible.
Nice. So recognizing that COVID-19 has changed a lot of attitudes around working from home and remote work in organizations, especially those that were staunchly opposed to it, who are now actually considering it, at least on a part-time basis, moving forward. Do you think that there's going to be kind of a wholesale change in the way organizations maybe view work from home as less of kind of a company perk to something that is just kind of part of the process or part of what they, how they go about doing business?
I definitely think there's a catch-22 problem when it comes to working remotely. Businesses don't mind people who work remotely. Mm-hmm. They do mind people who cannot commit at 100% and achieve as much as possible as compared to their on-site counterparts. Mm-hmm. But again, the reason that's catch-22 is that remote employees cannot become effective unless they're given a chance to work remotely, right? So the COVID-19 lockdown enables people to prove themselves as being trustworthy and effective and efficient in the sense of achieving the company goals the organization is after. And having more of those people just winning the trust and winning their seat at the, let's say, management table or whatever it is, just being trustworthy to talk to other people and lead other people will lead to a broader group of individuals who will enable a larger wave of remote working opportunities. Now, it's hard to tell whether more companies are going to jump on the remote bandwagon or not, but we already see the trend happening. By, I believe Microsoft 2 or 3 weeks ago, they said that they will let everyone to work remotely at least until October. Then Google and Amazon or Facebook, they said until the end of the year, we are going to work remotely. Mm-hmm. And Twitter said that their staff can work indefinitely remotely from now on.
Right.
And I think this is pretty groundbreaking. Previously, we had a couple of cases like IBM and Yahoo setting the foot and just saying, we are going to be a breakthrough business case study, so to speak, in the remote working industry. But then both companies, unfortunately, they backtracked and they say, well, we're just going to close all remote positions and we're going to get back to the office. So I'd say this is a couple steps back, and it really didn't enable more companies to fully work remotely. But the opportunity that this lockdown presents will inevitably lead to more and more companies operating remotely. And people are, again, we need to review that as 3 different segments of being able to work remotely. Management is number 1. Managers are forced to work with remote people now. And they will recognize that a good portion of their staff is just as effective or even more effective than they used to be while working on site. So this is number 1, and this is also going to affect other practices such as attending other offices or on-site meetings or anything like that. Number 2 is staff. Staff, employees are going to have a chance to set their home offices and switch to a remote working mindset so that they train themselves in being fully effective remote employees. And number 3 is tooling. We see how businesses like Zoom just bootstrapped from 20 or 30 million daily users, I believe, to like 200 million or so. It's like a 10x boost in a matter of a few weeks. We see the same in other video conferencing businesses and online training systems and so on. So these 3 components combined together will inevitably enable more businesses to start faster and to be more effective when launching a remote company.
All right. Well, Mario, thanks so much for kind of walking me through the whole work from home future, if you will, of especially in the area of software engineering, but pretty much any organization. So I really do appreciate your insights. Thanks again.
Thanks again for having me, Charlene. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody, stay tuned. There's plenty more on TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All right, thanks very much, Charlene. Well, following Charlene, if you've watched this show before, you know what time it is. It's the Analyst Corner with Mitch. ASG founder and CEO Mitchell Ashley with some words of wisdom. I think he has a new flash poll for us and more. So let's head it over now to Mitchell Ashley.
Welcome to this segment of Analyst Corner. Mike Vizard over on Devops.com reported about a survey that Atlassian completed, where they found that 2/3 of the respondents, of 500 total respondents, reported that they had slowed down the frequency of software delivery since the advent or the implementation of adjustments to COVID-19, the pandemic. Patrick Hill, head of reliability from Atlassian, said, well, while developers are creating more code ever since they're working from home, IT operation teams may be struggling to keep pace. I suspect that could be the case. It may also be some other factors. They also noted there's been a significant increase in demand for digital services to be provided, 73% increase, which also makes sense. Lots of adjustments folks are having to make as customer experiences need to shift. Business processes and patterns are also shifting. We also have a bit of a chaotic environment to write software for. Given that different economies are opening in different ways at different times, with different rules, maybe no rules in some cases. Let's hope not. That makes it a little tough to know exactly what kind of a use case or use cases you're actually creating a business or service for. Hopefully, if that settles down a little bit, that might help adjust some of that software and simplify that experience we're creating software for. But there's also just the disruption to the organization. And while developers may be more effective writing software, even more effective writing software, working from home, because often developers are very good at that already, others in the organization, not just IT operations, but others may also be unfamiliar or having to adjust to new patterns and new ways of working. I think by now they're probably settled in, but maybe they're thinking about returning to the office as things have opened up. A lot of businesses are not requiring everyone to come in. Maybe they're doing partial, they're doing shifts. Maybe it's all voluntary. If you don't feel like coming in, work from home, continue to stay there. I suspect we're seeing all of those patterns. And of course, that in of itself, again, means more change, more disruption, maybe shifting or slowing down what we're experiencing for delivering software. I think the key thing to remember is, and this backed up by this study, is that the demand for digital services and the adaptation to sort of the next normal of what we're building towards, or this next series of normals, frankly, is creating a lot of work, a lot of opportunity for developers, a lot of interesting things to do. But it also means other things may be setting aside, less priority, or maybe not at all. So we have a lot of things happening all at once. I hope that you're able to sort all of that through, maybe better than I am, for figuring out how these economies are opening. Certainly makes it a challenge to understand how you create businesses for that kind of environment. Hopefully this will settle into a next normal fairly quickly. So as you're doing that, I wish you the best. I hope you are succeeding at accelerating your digital transformation strategy and projects. So everyone, be careful, be safe, and be well.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of MediaOps here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. You know, the tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And you know, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at MediaOps for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, you know, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, you know, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.
This is Digital Anarchist at RSA San Francisco 2020.
Hi, Mitch Ashley. We're here at RSA 2020 with Verica, Casey, and Aaron. For part 2 of our conversation, you know, we got to the technical stuff. Alan bailed. Like, Mitch, you got to come in, you know, tag team like WWE, you know, hey, come rescue me now. So we're going to talk more about the chaos engineering. I really want to hear more about how you started this work at Netflix and how you came to kind of pick up, build on it, and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah. So I can say a little bit about the theory behind it and how we developed chaos engineering, and then go into security chaos engineering. So we sat down to define a proactive discipline in availability, right? The other disciplines in availability they're all great, they're all necessary. Incident response management, alerting, observability, disaster recovery, all great, but they all focus on time to detect and time to remediate, or time to recover, and that's reactive. And so we wanted to define something that can proactively improve availability. And it turns out that there's a field called resilience engineering outside of software that studies, you know, aircraft carriers, nuclear power plants, air traffic control, systems that have to be, you know, reliable. They just require it. And there's a lot of great research there about how you can improve a complex system that applies to software. So the model behind chaos engineering is this theory that says, like, look, the engineers implicitly optimize for a bunch of things as they go through their day working on a complex system. My favorite example is economics, right? Nobody has a rule that on your first day at work, you're not allowed to spin up 1 million instances in AWS, right? Nobody has that rule because engineers just know, like, oh, stuff has a cost, and if we spend too much money, we go out of business. You don't have to tell somebody that. They implicitly know it. The same is true of workload, right? You know your servers, your tools, your people can handle a certain amount of work, and if you give them too much work, they'll fall over, and it's game over. You don't have to tell them that.
It's almost like heuristics that are common sense, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like common sense. And so safety is the same way. The difference between safety and economics and workload is that engineers don't have an intuition for how safe they currently are. And I'm comfortable making that generalization over the industry because we still have incidents, right? Availability and security incidents.
Well, and the systems are often bigger than any one person can
fully
understand all
that's
aspects
the thing.
of it.
There's surprises, right? It's a surprise. If somebody knew that an incident was about to happen, they'd stop what they're doing and change their behavior to prevent it. So what chaos engineering does is it explores the boundary of the safety margin and presents that back to the engineers and the operators so that they build an intuition around how safe their system is, either from a security position or availability position. You know, we can teach them more about their security posture or their availability posture, and then implicitly they will change their behavior to adapt to that reality. Because right now with complex systems and the speed at which stuff is changing, a lot of engineers don't know if they're on solid ground or a stiff breeze is going to blow their system over, because the tools in existence now mostly verify the happy path. They don't explore the boundaries of where the vulnerabilities might be. So Chaos Engineering built tooling to do that, and Aaron was prescient enough to see that applied to security as well as availability. So
how did you come across it? Was it some open source or some speaking, or how did this suddenly show up on your doorstep and get your interest?
Well, so I was the chief security architect at the company at United.
United Health Group.
Oh, United Health Group, sorry, yeah. United
One
Health
of those
Group.
Uniteds.
There are multiple. I had been a part of leading and orchestrating the DevOps transformation at United, in that transition of the DevOps transformation, we ended up hiring our first ever SRE, Patrick Bergstrom. Patrick Bergstrom was at BestBuy.com, and the first day on the job, people introduced us, said, you two have to meet. And he started talking about this chaos engineering thing that they would do at BestBuy.com, and it resonated with me. And like I said, there's something here. This makes sense to me. My career, I was a software engineer most of my career, so and before I got into security. So I don't look at security and the system as two different things. I look at a system is secure or not, right? And the problems that chaos engineering addresses they affect security as well. So what we ended up doing was, one of the things I needed as the chief security architect is I love my craft, I love my work. I want to provide good recommendations about controls to teams and projects, and from a design perspective. I was never sure if it actually got implemented, or if I was right, or if it's correct, or got placed in the right place. So what we needed a way was to proactively identify whether or not those controls actually worked when in the situations that we planned for. And what we found out is not all they actually didn't about half the time. But what's great about chaos engineering is that, so when there's an incident or outage, security incident or not, that is not a very good learning environment. It's not about what
Trial
happened.
by fire, but maybe not learning environment.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, and it's about, within 15 or 30 minutes, the CEO will get involved, and the call center is getting overloaded, and we're losing money, get that thing back up and running, and we'll figure out what happened later. Of course, you'll always do thorough postmortems, but
and save all the data to be sure, do a thorough job, right?
Yeah. Well, the reality of it is people move from incident to incident, war room to war room, and but you're constantly just reacting to it. Whereas what we do is we proactively introduce turbulent conditions into the system and try to determine the conditions by which the system will fail before it actually does. And when you do it proactively and you're experimenting on the system, it's a better learning environment. Nobody's freaking out. There's no name, blame, and shame game. That all rhymed. Huh. That was good.
Write that down.
Keep that.
We got it.
Yeah, but that's the power in this stuff, is you don't have to incur customer pain to discover a failure. One of the things I used to say early on with my chaos talks is like, security incidents are not a measure of detection. It's too late by the time you detected it, if you detected it at all. So we spend a lot of money on security, and we need to ensure that actually functions when it needs to. And there's another issue too that really plagues security, is that the way we build modern software and the way we build modern security, or security in general, is not at the same pace. If you go to Velocity or it's Infonops, right? Rally's Infonops.
Infonops.
If you go to that conference and you look at a lot of the talks, you'll see technology and methods and tools that no one in security, you'll never see at a security conference. The engineering is at a different level, and the reason why I bring that up is that we're the speed, scale, and way that modern systems that we're building, the security doesn't often keep pace with the rest of the system. So you need a way to constantly ensure that your expectations are aligned.
Continuously verify.
Continuously verify. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm interesting. This may be a kind of an intersection of what you both were talking about. Taking what you described of going into those, I don't remember how you said it, but I think kind of boundary conditions, right? Mm-hmm. Is this Is this an approach where you kind of gradually escalate the level of stepping outside of that boundary as you're doing kind of chaos engineering and testing? Is that a reasonable?
Yes.
description?
Chaos engineering is not about breaking stuff in production, right? That benefits nobody.
That's chaos monkey.
That's yeah. I mean, really, you want to fix stuff in production, right? Like that's the goal. That's the value. And so, we recommend that when you start off with these tools, you do it in the safest environment possible. So if that's testing or staging, do it there. When you have the confidence that your system is robust enough to handle, reliable enough to handle the conditions that you're exploring, then you move it into the next environment. Ultimately, you want this thing running in production because that's the environment you care the most about. But you should never be running an experiment that you expect to fail, right? If you expect it to fail, then just fix it before you run it. You're not going to learn anything, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, it's about I expect this to be reliable enough, robust enough to handle these conditions. That's the hypothesis you're working with, and the automation, the tooling that we're bringing in, is just building confidence by verifying that for you continually. And then there's other technical tricks we can use to minimize the blast radius in case we do disprove a hypothesis, to make sure it doesn't impact any customers, or a small number of customers, depending on how critical the use case is, the business case is for it. But it's all about generating that learning to explore that boundary and the safety margin that you have.
Can you share, I love this. We both have stories that we tell each other stories. Tell the Kafka story. Was it the retail company or the bank?
Yeah, sure.
So that's a great example.
Of things that can go awry.
No, about doing it on stage.
So we had so there's a retail company that was dipping their toe into chaos engineering, and so they wanted to start with a game day, right? Which is basically you get everybody in a war room and you try one thing out. And they had a setup where they had a microservice architecture, stateless applications, Kafka cluster, pushing a bunch of data to Kafka cluster, which then moved the data off to push notifications for mobile and web apps, some billing stuff, some offline billing stuff, and logging. And that was a duplicate of their production environment, right? So they all get in a war room and they go, okay, our hypothesis is that the application should still work if Kafka goes down, and we should see logging stops working. They were specifically focusing on logging. So they had everybody in a war room to try this out on staging, not the production environment. And so they turn Kafka off on staging, and the production site goes down.
That was just right. Okay, something happened. Either something kept going or something went down, right? That shouldn't have.
Turns out that the way they had built this system, they originally had one Kafka cluster, and then they built out production later. And when they built the newer, bigger Kafka cluster, one of the environment variables hadn't been updated to point logging to the new one. So logging was still going through the staging Kafka cluster.
Who knew?
And when that went down, thread pools got exhausted on production. Now, fortunately, everybody was around a table and they could quickly bring the everything back up. But you can imagine learning that in an exercise like that versus somebody on a last thing on a Friday, they check off their list, take down the old staging environment, they go away for the weekend, the site goes down, and he's like, well, I didn't touch production, so couldn't have been my fault, doesn't get involved.
Got to involve a weekend, a holiday night, early in the morning, and you've gone to skiing in the mountains or something, right?
That could be really bad. And so that's the kind of thing you want to learn in a controlled environment. Not the way most of the industry learns stuff.
That's where you declare victory, claim a bug's now a feature, and you move on. We're I'd love to go further into this. So let's find a way to get back together. How do people find out about Verica? How do they download your software, start working with it, work with you?
Verica.io. They can contact us there. We have we run Chaos Community Days, a small conference a couple times.
The original Chaos Engineering Conference here at Netflix.
Yeah, we launched it 5 years ago at Netflix. so they can participate in that if they want to just dip their toe into the area, learn more about it. Books coming out. So there's a chaos engineering report out from O'Reilly that I wrote with my team at Netflix a few years back. An animal O'Reilly book is coming out in print next month from when this was recorded, and we've got a security chaos engineering book coming out in June of this year.
Oh, excellent! Well, keep in touch. Let us know when the books.
There's a lot of ways to get a hold
come
of
out.
us.
Yeah, it's. I was just had a talk. One of our analysts, accelerated strategies analyst, was giving a talk last night to CIOs, CISOs. One of the topic that like what's coming, chaos engineering for security and
awesome
testing.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's a theme. So,
That's great.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much
working.
for joining us here. I wish you the best. I'm sure you'll do well. It's a great area to be in.
This was great.
And let us know how it's progressing.
Okay, we will.
We'll do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
Yeah, no problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place, you know?
Wow.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
You know our car doesn't fit in their drive-through. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger. He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Okay, thanks very much, Mitchell. All right, guys, it was a good show today, a great Tuesday. You know, we've got the Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S. coming up, long weekend. Just a heads up, this coming Friday, we're actually closing down the Media Ops studio for Friday as we're going to take a long mental health weekend here at Media Ops. We are going to try to replay a best of. We're going to pick one of the TechStrong TV segments from a previous day and just stream that out there. But we won't be doing our usual stream show for this Friday. But we will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, February, May 20th. And with another great show, so we'll see you there tomorrow. We hope you're staying well, staying safe, staying strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel.